Just when you think you're out, they suck you back in. There is nothing like a top 10 iconic list to get me interested and have some thoughts on. Mike, baseball collector, has asked to have people chime in with their ideas and thoughts on what they think are the top 10 iconic baseball cards of all time. Now, while I may have sold off the majority of my collection and have transitioned more into the non-sports card, comic, pop culture, nostalgia realm, I've been a baseball card collector for a long time and still am. And I have some thoughts on what my top 10 should look like, and I would love to hear what you think as well. So let's get into it. So I knew I had to make a video because I've been traveling all week, and often in the past, it's been a minute since I've made a video, but I've made videos while on the road, living in hotels. But I was so busy this week that I didn't have the chance or the time. But man, I have been thinking about this list all week, and I knew I needed to get a video made. So, like I said, I am coming out of quasi-retirement. Ironically, there's a couple folks I reached out to as early as last week and said, I'm thinking of starting to make some content again, more specifically non-sports, pop culture, comics, like I said. But then I saw this video from Mike, baseball collector, and I'm like, you know, at first, I'm a sucker for any top 10 list, as most of us are, top 25, top 50. I will sit through it, I will watch it, as most of us, I think, are prone to do. This one really got me thinking, and I saw some others that have made videos, and that got me thinking even more. And I put a lot of thought into this, probably too much thought. So much that I've actually wanted to first off define what I think iconicness, I'm gonna make up a name, and I'm gonna use that name throughout this video, that what iconicness means specifically in the baseball card collecting realm. I made 3 categories that what can make a card iconic, and I have my list in front of me here. The first one, I put rarity and price. So that's the first category that I think would create iconic status for a card. Often price comes because of the rarity, but usually those are hand in hand. If it's rare, it's going to be expensive. But they're also, because they're rare, they're well known, and because they're well known, they can become iconic. Number 2, it's a card of a specific player, a legendary player, a larger than life player, every generational player that everybody knows about. A card of that caliber would create its iconicness. And third, I put it's a hobby changing or a very significant card in the hobby. So that's where it would not necessarily be player related or not necessarily rare, but it's something that changed the game when it came to collecting in the hobby. So those are the 3 categories that I used to determine and define what I think are iconic cards. So without further ado, let's get into this top 10. And I'm so proud of myself. I didn't even have an honorable mention. I just had to really pare this down to 10 and stick to 10. And I took all of my personal biases and all of my personal beliefs as to what I think are like a beautiful card or a card that I want or have that I've kept. This was really just based on what I think overarching has affected the hobby and continues to affect the hobby to today. So number 10, I have the 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson. This is a card, besides it being beautiful and a well-known rookie card of one of the best players of all time, it was a kind of a beginning of the end, or actually kind of it was a talisman, there's a good word for you, of things to come. It was the last year before there was really only one brand, one maker of cards, Topps, in the hobby. The next year would see the inclusion of Fleer and of Donruss, and then the hobby would become much more crowded and collecting options expanded threefold. And then, you know, down the road, then you had Upper Deck, then you had Score, and then you had, you know, different versions of Fleer, different versions of Donruss, different versions of Topps. 1980 was kind of the last year, not kind of, it was the last year that you had one option. And of that set, the 1980 Topps is kind of like, that whole set is kind of iconic in that way because it was the last. That's the card to get out of that set. So in a way, it's more symbolic of the era changing, the hobby changing in 1981. So 1980 was that last year where you could just really choose one. I mean, yeah, we can get in the weeds about, like, you know, some oddball weird ones back in the day, whatever. And then you had Topps, Bowman, you know, back in the 50s and late 40s. But my point is, for the longest time, it's just been Topps. And after 1980, no longer. And Rickey Henderson was the card, and still is the card to have from that significant 1980 set. All right. Number 9 is the 1989 Fleer Billy Ripken. And this is a card that and it's not just because I lived through it and I experienced it and wanted to have it and eventually got one and was looking for one. It was the kind of the epitome of a chase card. And it was also that time, at least for most of us, that there's like, oh, card companies can mess up. Ooh, the mess up is what we want. We don't want the right one. We want the wrong one. Never mind the fact that it had, you know, the F-bomb on the end of the bat. It was that time of, like, collecting wasn't just, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't just vanilla. It was like, okay, there was a bit of a rebel streak that was added to it. And it was a chase card. We wanted to. And then Fleer was trying to, like, oh crap, we had that on the back, on the end of the bat. That's a bad word, blah, blah, blah. Let's blur it out. Oh crap, that didn't work. Let's put a box over it. Okay, that didn't work. All of those different variations that came out of it. And we were there for it. We were grabbing the popcorn and we were buying the 89 Fleer. And I think that card signifies a moment. And whether purposeful or not, that's another card video for another debate for another time, was that created that awareness with the card companies. And they may deny it, but come on. That was really like the first true height of the junk wax era, but it was a chase card, right? So I had to include the 1989 Fleer Billy Ripken. Going back to 1915 for number 8, we have the 1915 Cracker Jack Joe Jackson. And this card, along with the next probably maybe 2, I'd say on my list, spoiler alert, are more indicative of the set than it is of the card. But from that set, the card to get, among many, I mean, you could do the 14 or the 15 Cracker Jacks. Absolute iconic set. And the Joe Jackson is the card to get, right? So that's why I included it on this list, is because I wanted to, not necessarily felt obligated to have the set on here, but being such a pivotal, beautiful, well sought after, very expensive, often rare sets, the Joe Jackson is the card to get in that 1915 or 14 Cracker Jack set. So I had to include that card. Coming in at number 7, and this is an interesting one because I don't know, I've watched maybe 7 or 8 videos on this topic since Mike brought the request up last week. I haven't seen this one presented yet. And I think a lot of us are not realizing how important this set and this example of this set with this card is. And that's the 1993 Topps Finest Refractor Ken Griffey Jr. This was a game-changing set. For those of you who don't know, this is the first time that there were refractors in the card collecting sphere. And this was the set. When this first came out, I stopped collecting around 91, 92, but I was still kind of, interested when 93 came along. And I remember this set coming out, and like, what the heck is this? Kind of like the vibes of the '89 Upper Deck, right? But this was like these cards that were had a heavier stock, and they like had like this shine, and it was, wow, these are beautiful cards. And of that whole set, Ken Griffey Jr. seems to be the one that people would want the most. I know it demands a lot of the most money for resale. Maybe you could argue for like maybe the Barry Bonds. I know for a long time the Nolan Ryan was high priced. I haven't checked that, but I do know, being a Seattle guy too, that Ken Griffey Jr. was the one to get, because he was in the prime of his career in '93, and this was just a game-changing set. Imagine just today's card collecting sphere, and you can't go 2 feet 2 inches without running into a refractor, and you know, it's really muddied up the collecting world if you want, but the amount of refractors, they can all be traced back to the 1993 Topps Finest, and I think that's very, very iconic, because I don't see refractors going away anytime soon. So that was my number 7. Number 6, the 1888 Allen and Ginter Mike King Kelly. So this is an iconic set, the 1988 Allen and Ginter set. And Mike Kelly, King Kelly, was, you know, arguably the first superstar for baseball. So, you know, if you wanted to have, like, you know, the kids that are waiting outside the tobacconist with the adults buying the cigarettes, asking if they can have their cards, I guarantee you this is the one they wanted, because Mike Kelly was it. And I mean, just look at this card. This card's gorgeous. But that was not why people wanted that card back then. It was just because he was the larger than life player. He just signed the biggest contract ever. He was, you know, he was that first player that kind of transcended the diamond. He was kind of larger than life. You know, he was like a figure that, you know, people wanted to emulate and wanted to be like, and, you know, his status, you know, outside of baseball was big, and this was the card of him, right? So this was an important card for me to include, because this was the first example of a true superstar captured on cardboard from an iconic set, the 1988 Allen and Ginter Mike King Kelly. Number 5. The 1954 Topps Hank Aaron. Now, when I was making this list, I wanted to make sure that I didn't just, hey, this is the best player, so I have to have a card of him, because therein is another discussion for another day. Does iconicness create the player, or does the player create the iconicness? And in some instances, it can go either way. But I didn't want to have a card just because the player is larger than life. Like, I'll give you an example. There is no way in the world I would include the 1963 Pete Rose rookie, because that is, personal opinion, if you're a Pete Rose collector, I'm really sorry that's the rookie card that you have to go after, because the 4 floating heads, it does nothing for me. And obviously you would want to go for the next year card, you know. Same thing with the Tony Oliva. You go for the next year with the rookie cup. And there's others, you know, if you have a shared card, if it's like a split card, like, you know, Nolan Ryan, Rod Carew, Tom Seaver, that's okay for me. I prefer the first standalone card, but when you have a card like Pete Rose's rookie, I'm sorry, that's almost anti-iconic in my opinion. But my point is, he's an iconic player, but because he's iconic, I don't feel obligated, nor should anybody, I think, make a card iconic because of him. He's iconic on his own, regardless of what the cardboard looks like. Hank Aaron 1954 is a different story, because A, it's a beautiful card, B, it's a beautiful set, and C, he is an iconic player. And of that whole set, I mean, you could argue the Ernie Banks rookie, because that's just a fantastic image as well. Just the pure joy that's on Ernie's face is almost, you know, puts in an iconic status alone. But come on, it's Hank Aaron. I mean, just the home run king, right? I mean, just everything that comes with him. And you just look at that card, and there's not one person, I don't own one, never have, probably never will. But for everybody who owns one, I've watched countless videos of folks that have had one, have picked one up, and just the automatic just joy of having that card. and wanting to show it and share it and talk about it, and work towards getting it. It's a moving card. And I think that's sometimes where it transcends the cardboard, and you look at the player, you look at the iconic status, you look at what he means to the hobby, what he means to the sports, and the card itself. All of those things tied in together, I think, make the 1954 Hank Aaron from Topps an iconic card. Number 4, the 1953 Bowman Color Pee Wee Reese. Now, this is one of an example of a card that was hobby changing or significant. Not taking anything away from Pee Wee Reese, fantastic player, but he's not iconic because of himself or his career. It's the card itself, it's the image, it's what that action shots meant for the hobby, and action shots that were to follow. You could really just, it was the culmination. It was like that paradigm shift. Just like you hadn't seen a card like that before. I mean, look at the whole Bowman set, right? The 1953 color set. That thing is so significant and stands out. And then it transcends that set and becomes this action pose that just captivates. I know there are some naysayers that don't like the card or just think it's okay. I just think it's a significant card. Even if I don't like it, which I do, it's still a card that you have to take notice of and realize the impact it had on the hobby and the impact it has on collectors, and the fact that that image alone is just kind of an iconic hobby image that I believe puts it on this list and pretty high up, number 4. Now, you ask me next week, it could be lower, but for now, I think it should be high on the list for what that card stands for. Okay, we've reached our top 3, and I have to give a caveat disclaimer that this is where I might get some tomatoes thrown at me, and people are going to question my judgments. It's funny, I watched a video earlier this week. A gentleman said that if you didn't have these 2 certain cards, 1 and 2, you know nothing about the hobby. And that person is entitled to their opinion. And I'm sure he has a lot of hobby knowledge, as do I. And I like to present my thinking coming up. So that being said, the number 3 card I have on this list is the T206 Honus Wagner. Now, I would say 90%, maybe 95% of people who make a list will have that number 1. And if not number 1, number 2. I have it number 3, and it'll make a little more sense when I tell you what number 2 and number 1 is. But this is the perfect example of a card that everybody knows about, but they know about it because it's rare. It's not because of the player. He was a fantastic player, don't get me wrong, but the rarity is what defines this card. When I was collecting back in the 80s, I had heard about it. You started seeing it on the Beckett magazines, and you started wondering about it. And then you found out, okay, why is this rare? You know, and you start telling the stories about, you know, he wasn't too keen on himself being on a tobacco card because he didn't smoke, and he was against the tobacco companies. So it was a short print. They pulled the card. It's very rare, and it kind of just became a symbol of rarity, and it just became larger than life, to the point now that it is the most expensive, most sought after, like holy grail, unicorn, it almost transcends reality, this card, right? But I put it number 3 because I believe it is that iconic solely based on its rarity. And there are 2 cards that I will mention here in a moment that are, in my opinion, more iconic beyond it being rare, right? I think the T206, for as old it is, 1911, T206, it's rare. It's a symbol of just a card that everybody would want to have, obviously, because you could, you know, retire and pay for your kids, your grandkids, and your great-grandkids' college education with it. But I think just the fact that, in my opinion, again, just my opinion, I think the rarity alone puts it at number 3, okay? Maybe it'll make more sense in a minute. Now, when I tell you what number 2 is, you're going to say, what the hell is number 1? Number 2 was the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. this is just a symbol of collecting, right? This is and I'm not even a huge fan of this card. I would much rather have his 1953 or his 53 Topps or his 51 Bowman. I think the 52 is cool, but it's not his greatest card, but I get it. I mean, it's the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. And it's just, that is kind of attached to, if you were to look up baseball card collecting in the dictionary, that would be the card next to the definition, right? That's a card that's, I even growing up in the late 70s, early 80s playing baseball, I knew about Mickey Mantle. But when I saw that card, that kind of became synonymous. That card alone became synonymous with him if you were into baseball cards. That was all over the Beckett magazines, and it just became synonymous with card collecting. And Mickey Mantle was one of the biggest players of all time in baseball, let alone in baseball card collecting. He's one of those larger than life players that was just, synonymous with being cool. I mean, the 50s and 60s, everybody wanted to be Mickey Mantle when they stepped up to the plate. And I get that. So it is an absolute symbol of baseball card collecting and always will be, whether you collect modern or vintage. The 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle is it. Okay, so that leaves me with one card, and the card that I selected as the most iconic baseball card of all time is the 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. So, why did I select this over the Honus Wagner and the Mickey Mantle? Simply because for most people, the collectors that's either my age or a little younger, you knew about the Ken Griffey Jr. 89 Upper Deck rookie card is a gateway card. That created baseball card collecting as we know it, in my opinion. There's no way that you could get around that card. It was synonymous and it was game-changing. It is the card that created or enhanced collecting. I collected cards since about 1978 and all through the 80s. And then when 89 hit, now I'm taking my bias out of it because I am a Seattle guy, and Ken Griffey Jr. is God in Seattle. So I'm aware of that, but part of that, it enhanced it even more. And I was in a bubble. So in 89, I knew that Ken Griffey Jr. was popular, but I had no idea that it was nationwide or even to some extent worldwide. But Upper Deck itself changed the game with their cards, with their photography, for their quality, their card stock, the technology that came with that set. And for them to have the balls to put a rookie that hadn't even played a game, that they weren't even sure would make the team, but they put him as the #1 card in that set. The cojones on Upper Deck, I mean, talk about paying off. And I get it. There are as many Upper Deck cards out there for Ken Griffey Jr. I mean, the reprints, I mean, there's millions of them, right? But it's the status of that card and what it means for the hobby. It was a game changer. It is a significant card. And I think the significance of the 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. card is higher than the 52 Mantle and the Honus Wagner, because most of us, a lot of us, a majority of us had the Griffey awareness first, which then created the awareness of going back and looking at other cards. I'm not saying everybody, I'm not using that as a blanket statement. That's not a broad brush. But a lot of us, the Upper Deck rookie card of Ken Griffey Jr. was the card that created the awareness of so many other cards in the past, and created that buzz for us to want to collect to come. And I think, I mean, still today, look at the prices of that Upper Deck. I mean, I was looking at them today. It's ridiculous. A PSA 10 is going to be, a couple thousand now. I mean, it's really high right now, but that's insane. For as many as there are, it's the most graded card in history. And it still creates that sense of value. And it is symbolic. It is arguably as symbolic to the hobby as the 52 Mantle, in my opinion, or the Honus Wagner. But that's just my thoughts. But I wanted to give some reasoning behind it, because I know it's not the normal ranking that you will see in most of these videos. So I have rambled for a long time, but I wanted to put my thoughts and my kind of mindset into this response video. So thank you, Mike, for, broaching the subject. You snapped me out of my quasi-retirement to make this video, and we're about 24 minutes in. Jeez, I can talk. So obviously there'll be thoughts. I would love to hear them. Tell me why I'm right. Tell me why I'm wrong. Give me a point counterpoint. I'm here for it. I just love top 10 lists. And probably we'll make more to come on this channel. So, we'll see. Anyways, appreciate you if you stuck this long. And I will hopefully see you again real soon. All right, catch you later.